Hi, I'm here today to talk about Colson Whitehead's new novel, Harlem Shuffle. So, Colson Whitehead, this came out in 2021. I should remember the month. I got it when it was new. I was very excited. In the last couple years, I've become a big fan of Colson Whitehead. And so I was very excited to hear he had a new novel coming out. We're going to talk a little bit about Harlem Shuffle to live up to our beer. We have here today KC Beer Company, their Schwartz beer, which is a black lager. It's decocted, naturally carbonated. KC Beer Company, really good. I enjoy their stuff. They're like super specific in a German kind of Austrian brewing. But yeah, so I'm gonna pour this in a cool German cup I got. To start, the novel Harlem Shuffle is split into three sections. So it is 1959, 1961, and then it ends with the section in 1964. Obviously, it's set in Harlem, New York. You would hope, being called the Harlem Shuffle, that it had something to do with Harlem. And it centers around the character of Ray Carney and kind of this cast of characters that he meets: family, friends, acquaintances, enemies, a bunch of people. So, Ray Carney, in his main family, he's married to a woman named Elizabeth. They are expecting children, then later have children. They live in this apartment. And basically, the important part that you learn right away from Ray Carney is that he is a furniture salesman. He owns his own shop. He is a businessman, and that's what he's trying to do. But he is not above doing the sometimes shady deal, like selling something that maybe has fallen off the back of a truck. So we know he is a businessman and he considers himself a very upright guy, but he isn't above making an extra buck here or there, doing things that may be sort of sketchy. Throughout the novel, we find out more that Ray comes from sort of a sordid background. His father was like a thug, um, definitely in the criminal part of Harlem, whereas Elizabeth's family was much more affluent. And they live in a part of Harlem that Ray constantly refers to as Shriver's Row. And you learn this pretty early on, and it kind of informs one of the central conflicts and kind of ideas in the book is the Strivers versus the Crooks. The Strivers being these people who are trying to, pull themselves up by the bootstraps, very American dream style, um, versus the Crooks who are just trying to get by in a broken system and are using any way to do that possible. And so Ray kind of has his feet in both worlds, and throughout the novel has to grapple with which is better, which actually does what it sets out to do. Are there differences, and in what ways are they the same? But when you're being sold this book, or when you're looking at this book, you're going to hear about this big heist that happens. And so Ray's cousin Freddie kind of gets him in on this heist. And you would think for a heist novel that it would build up to the heist, that would be the climax. Not true here. The heist actually happens in the first part of the novel. So there's three parts. It happens in the first part. And it's great. A lot of heist stuff, a lot of about crime and kind of the underworld. And then from there, it unfolds over like almost 10 years. Let's see, 59 to 6, so 5 years. And while, if you know anything about Colson Whitehead, you know the Underground Railroad and Nickel Boys were very like clearly examinations of race and racism at different points in American history, or like obviously the Underground Railroad is not historical, but you get the idea. This still does those things, but it's much more subtle and in the background of what's going on versus the main plot. And I don't want to give too much away because there are twists and turns. It is much more like a crime noir story than it is like just straight literary fiction. And so we can kind of get into what is the literary context of this book. Time for a beer break. His debut was The Institutionist in 1999, which kind of put him on the scene as a like pretty someone to look out for in the contemporary literary scene. And then from there, he kind of quietly built this reputation in the background. And then with his sixth novel, The Underground Railroad, that got huge, right? So you've probably heard, if not read, The Underground Railroad. It's a fantastic novel. I think it was like one of the Oprah Book Club picks. I know it won some awards. I think he might have won a Pulitzer. Um, but it was huge. That kind of catapulted his name into much more every day. More and more people would know who he is. And from there, he published The Nickel Boys, which was his last novel. Um, and that also, did very well, very successful. And apparently, he had been working on this book, Harlem Shuffle, kind of that entire time in the background. And then throughout 2020, with like different quarantines and things, he decided just to kind of sit down and finish it. And so that's where we're at today. So the novel debuted at number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list in September. Like I said, it's been a little bit since I read it, since I did read it pretty close to when it came out. But I really, really enjoyed it. The Kirkus Review called it audacious, ingenious spellbinding. It's been called Dickensian as far as like the amount of idiosyncratic and kind of colorful characters, which is both like a plus and a negative, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And then a lot of people, a lot of different reviewers and critics have mentioned the way that he really creates a vivid picture of New York, Harlem in the 60s. And like he really makes you feel like it's a real place. Well, I mean, obviously it's a real place. It was a real place, but it makes you feel like you're there. He does a really good job of bringing that place and time to life. And specifically, I think the character of Ray Carney, he really makes you feel like Ray Carney is a person, and by the end of the book, really makes you feel like he's a friend or at least someone you know, an acquaintance that you've been following their life, and you're kind of rooting for them, even if you're not sure, if they always have their head on straight. So with the characters, when they say Dickensian, I think they're talking about the amount of ancillary characters that are around, how colorful they are. They each kind of have like quirks or unique backstory or function or whatever. But they're not that deep, really. They don't really grow or change. They are what they are. The only character who really changes much is Ray Carney. And even then, you could say he changed. I mean, he does change. He grows. But so it is a plus that Whitehead is able to create like a world that's populated by so many colorful characters, but it could be a negative in that they're not particularly deep, nor do they grow or change much. They're kind of, I wouldn't say caricatures, but they're almost like cartoon characters. Like they are what they are, and they serve the purpose that they serve, but it doesn't go much further beyond that. The other thing I've heard a lot is the pacing. A lot of people have had complaints about the pace of the novel. And like I said, it would seem like going into it, when you think of it as a heist novel, that there'd be a lot going on, or that would be kind of at the center of the story, the climax. But really, that heist happens very, very early. And then it is the story of Ray Carney and his life with the backdrop of like civil rights and Harlem and, you know, having to decide between being a striver and a crook. That's really the crux of the story. And for me, that really, really worked. I really, really enjoyed the book. I read it super quickly. I didn't think the pace was too slow. But in doing some research before filming my review, I've seen numerous people say that they thought the pacing was slow, or that Whitehead would go on these tangents and explain things, and take way too long doing it. So that could be a concern. For me, I thought the pacing was great. It really worked for me. And like I said, a lot of it is building up Carney and having you go through his life over these 5 years, and really the ups, the downs, the pitfalls, the surprises, um, the pivots he has to make. And you are going through that with him, that central struggle of, is it better to be a striver or a crook? Can you ever change from one to the other? Is it possible to create the life you want without breaking a few rules? And I think that's a really compelling journey. And like I said, by the end, I remember thinking like, okay, this is like a 3-star novel for me. And then at the end, really thinking about Ray Carney and how much he felt like a fully realized character, like a person. And I know it's weird to say, it really felt like subtly over the course of the novel, he Whitehead built up enough layers, enough nuance, enough personality, enough little facets of Ray that it really felt more like a person than a character. And I don't have that happen to me a whole lot. And so just for that aspect alone, I think I ended up scoring it 4 stars. And I would say it's worth reading just to see how Whitehead creates that character out of nothing. Like I said, I don't want to get too much into the plot because I don't want to spoil things. I think it is still kind of a crime noir book, so I don't want to ruin the heist or what happens, or and then from there, even the rest of it, there's a lot of twists and turns and what's going to happen, who's going to make it out, what things are going on. And I don't want to ruin any of that for you because I think that helps you grow right along with Ray. So I'm going to leave the analysis part there, and we'll kind of wrap up here with a few quotes that I selected from the novel that I think are particularly interesting or just made me laugh or I thought were worth sharing. So we will start here. So sorry, I have to read these off another screen. So part of moving up in the world is realizing how much shit you used to eat. Entrepreneur, Pepper said the last part like manure. That's just a hustler who pays taxes. Crooked world, straight world, same rules. Everybody had a handout for the envelope. Strivers grasped for something better, and crooks scheme about how to manipulate the present system. The world as it might be versus the world as it was. But perhaps Carney was being too stark. Plenty of crooks were strivers, and plenty of strivers bent the law. And I think that last quote there really, really hits the nail on the head about like what this novel is trying to do and what it's really trying to take a look at, and that is, can you be a striver if you were a crook? And is it even really better to be a striver? And are the strivers really doing it the right way, or do they just have a different way of manipulating the same system? Anyway, it's a fascinating thing. So far, Whitehead is knocked out of the park. I've just read his last 3 novels, so Underground Railroad, Nickel Boys, and The Harlem Shuffle. And then I read Zone 1, which is like a zombie novel he did. Zone 1 I don't think is quite as good. It doesn't stand up to these 3. It's still worth checking out if you really enjoy. I do plan on going back and reading more Whitehead. I think he is a super interesting author. He's definitely one of the people that I've tried to be more contemporary in my reading in the last few years, and he's one of the people that is on my radar. If they release something, I'm gonna check it out. And we'll be doing a few more of those people kind of this in the coming months as well. So I'm excited. Let me know what you think in the comments below if you've read it. If you haven't, let me know, what you think of the new format. Also, if you have any thoughts about anything. And again, just it happened a lot back in the day when I was making videos. If I didn't cover a particular aspect or I didn't say something quite the way you think, let me know in the comments. I'm more than happy to continue the discussion down there. Anyway, I appreciate you guys watching the video. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Peace.